Well, you know me by now. I get overexcited at the thought of talking to my haiku idols. And here I am again, having a Zoom chat with one of my haiku heroes, Stanford M Forrester, editor of Bottle Rockets. Yes. Hello, Stanford.
Hi, how are you?
Well, thank you very much. Thanks very much for
Yeah,
coming along and doing
so happy
this.
to be here.
Great. Now, I can't believe that you don't know who he is, but for those of you who really don't, here's a little bit about him. Stanford M Forrester is a past president of the Haiku Society of America and founder and editor of Bottle Rockets, a collection of short verse. His poems have appeared in the anthology Haiku, published by Knopf in the Everyman's Library Pockets Poets series. It's quite a mouthful. And
Hmm.
American Zen, a gathering of poets, published by Bottom Dog Press. In 2003, one of his haiku took first seat in the 57th annual Basho anthology contest in Ueno, Japan, and another was a prize winner in the Haiku International Association's 6th annual haiku contest in 2004. He served as a judge for the Japan Society in New York City, the Haiku Society of America, and the Haiku Poets of Northern California. And sometimes he goes by his haiku Sekiro, which means stone dew or dew on a stone. Have I said that right, Stanford?
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. So, in a wee while, we're going to talk Yūgen. But as you know, when I have a guest, I like to read you some of their work. Depression, summer and unemployment, both running out. Now, for me, that came very close to home. I mean, it took me back years, but it spoke to me of the time when I was at university, had no money, and the unemployment situation was pretty poor. So some years I'd get work and some years I wouldn't. But you know, the end of summer when you have to go back to college or university or school, and those fun days of playing tennis or swimming or whatever you've been doing are over, and the unemployment money is running out. It's just very depressing. So that evokes wonderful, well, maybe not wonderful memories for me, but memories anyway. And I wondered, Stanford, where does it come from in your life?
Well, this was a fairly recent poem written, obviously at this time during the COVID. I've been in publishing for like 30 years. I started at Yale University Press. I did about 8 years there, and then I've been running Bottle Rockets Press since then. But that was always considered my first job. But I had two other side jobs, one working in a bookstore and one working at this prep school, which decided to lay me off after 16 years.
Oh,
So I've lost two jobs within a year period of time, and I'm actually quite happy because what it's done is it's finally letting me, even though I've always given 100% to haiku, now it's 100% without the other 50 or 75% of other things.
yeah.
But so it really was kind of like, with your mind going nuts during a period of time, and being aware of how long it's how long time, being aware of time.
Yeah. So here's another one. Tea ceremony. It begins and ends with an empty cup. Tea ceremony. It begins and ends with an empty cup.
This poem could be a death poem.
Oh,
um no, in a positive way. I mean, I death poems are not negative. I mean, they the Japanese tradition, there's a good book, I think, by Hoffman on Japanese death poems.
okay.
And but the beauty of this is the understanding of life, and it's also a play on the idea of the cup half empty, the cup half full. It's also a play on what is, I think, rational, maybe relativism or rationalism, where it's not the cup. I mean, it's not what's in the cup; it's the cup itself. But then you also have a play too on Diogenes, the Greek philosopher, who was basically trying to live as simple life as possible. And then he was down by the river one day and he saw a little boy cupping his hands, drinking the
Ah.
water. And he was so mad at himself because he hadn't thought of that. He threw the cup away. But of course, you don't want to be drinking coffee or tea out of your hands.
No, not
But
necessarily.
and the idea is too the futility of things, where the ceremony is kind of like the life, tea ceremony. That is our life. It begins and ends with an empty cup. So
Hmm.
to understand those are all natural things, that there has to be a beginning in one sense and there has to be an end. But it's, again, it's a seamless, and if you know about it and understand it, that's what we need to do.
Oh, you see, to me, it was just such a simple, it's a very simple idea. It's one of those
Yes.
poems that I love, that it makes me think, it's like a light bulb going off in your head,
Yeah.
and, poet's envy again. I wish I'd written it, because it's
Yeah.
just such a simple idea, but it's just wonderful, a wonderful clarity. And I also thought, because we're doing Yūgen here today, I thought it also had um, a modern take maybe on that, but I thought perhaps maybe I'd leave that for later, because I'm getting ahead of myself here, and
Yeah.
we should maybe go on to try and define Yugen. But before we go on, I think you made a good point when we were discussing things a little bit earlier, Stanford, that we should put a disclaimer in here. So you put it so eloquently last time. Could you go for the disclaimer again, please?
Sure. I have an extensive library of haiku books, and I used to work at Yale Press, so I had access to the Yale Library, which is, humongous. It's the size of small cities,
Mhm.
and the point is that Yugen, like many other things like haiku and senru and ideas and forms of or things, have changed throughout the years, throughout the centuries. So it's very hard when we discuss Eugen, we are doing it here in an extremely general way, because there's different periods of time where it had different aspects, or lost aspects, gained aspects. And also, depending what definition you read from, where this an author is coming from. If it's no, I guess Yugen is a major component of no theater. So you might get a slight bit definition, or they might be looking at Eugen a different way for theater than they might be looking for Eugen, let's say, in poetry.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
so it's basically virtually impossible for us to cover this in one podcast. Again, we need a symposium, probably Oxford, Cambridge, or Harvard, or Yale, and go for a week or two. And then we would probably agree on a few things and probably not on the most. And then everyone would write a paper.
Hey, well, they'll just have to make do with us two today,
Yeah.
I'm afraid. But do you remember, when we started thinking about doing this today, what you said to me about defining Eugene?
Yes, it's my guess. It's pretty tough. And we have some definitions that we'll talk about. And, I look at this as in the same way. It's like you need a stepping stone to kind of
Hmm.
get started, but it's the same thing with haiku. Is definitions are always argued. That's why there's hundreds or maybe thousands of different poetry groups in Japan, because they all have a different definition. There's no definitive definition of haiku. It
Hmm.
does not exist. And my guess would be the same with Yūgen or even Zen. How do you describe Zen? It's just you have to get the feel for it. It's like, again, like if you wanted to listen to a certain type of music, and it would be hard to describe, I would just give that person 10 hours worth of CDs or records and say, listen to this. This is how you're gonna. And I think that's, our approach here is giving a few examples and just kind of, again, exploring.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And we've both done, as you said, a humongous amount of reading for today. And we've looked at the evolution of the ideas, and we've looked at various definitions. And I have to tell you, Stanford, that at one time I think, oh, I've cracked it. I know what I'm talking about now. And then all of a sudden it slips through my fingers and it's
me
gone
too.
again. It's
Absolutely.
so, um, I think people, as you said in the disclaimer, this is a very general broad look at things. People will some people will agree with us, some people will disagree with us, but it's out there to put some ideas into people's heads and to,
And I also think too that Eugen, like any tool in a poet's toolbox,
Mhm.
this is, is every poet is gonna, if a poet even uses it, okay, it's a tool, so it doesn't mean it has to be in every single poem.
Yeah.
But also, depending on the style of the poet, we have to think about what degree are they using Yūgen? Is it heavily filled? Is it
Mm-hmm.
subtly filled? Um, those are and what aspect of Yūgen does each poet choose? And then we have to think of us again as the reader of poetry. Is haiku poets are generally we've been trained or learned how to be aware of the subtleties in life. That's why we're poets. We
Mm-hmm.
we see things other people don't see. And it's a very common, for example, idea in Jodo Shinshu, which is Pure Land Japanese Buddhism, where they say there's this power above us. This is Yūgen all the way. A power above us, it's always there, but it's almost like we have a boat and we have a sail, and the power is the wind all around us. If we don't hoist the sail, we don't tap into that energy or that power.
Mm-hmm.
So as haiku poets, that's what we need to be aware when we read, and know that it's a cosmology, an Asian cosmology. So if we do use Yūgen, which you and I had talked about in our own stuff, I mean, I was a practicing Buddhist for 30 years. So I have some stuff with Buddhas in it, because I went to a Buddhist temple for 30 years, and I mean, going to another temple before that even. But so our Yūgen could maybe be some a different type, not based on the Shinto, the Buddhist, the Taoist, the shamanistic thought groups in Asia, but it could be what we talk about, maybe some stuff in Catholicism, right, with the mystery of the I don't know, the Holy Trinity. I'm not a Christian, so I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, but we have in the West our aspects, or maybe like an old amusement park,
Mm-hmm.
like Brighton Pier. I could, in England, I remember going there. That had a lot of Yūgen of the past in it. Like,
Yes.
like even like these old arcade machines. You could
Yeah.
write about arcade machines. They have the one with the gypsy fortune teller, right? There's Yūgen right there. Drop a quarter in or whatever, how many euros to get your fortune from a mechanical gypsy. That's Yūgen.
Okay. Do we have to go any further then? Because I think you have actually got some definition for us, haven't you, Stanford?
So I want to read the Alan Watts one first, which is much shorter, or about
Okay.
Alan Watts and Yūgen. Yūgen is not simply an aesthetic ideal to be striven for in art, but here's the key, should be ideally experienced and embodied in one's life. That's really important. Yūgen means eliciting psycho-spiritual well-being through an awareness of the mysterious depths of existence, and implies being deeply moved to the core of one's being without quite knowing why.
Mm.
So I look at it too as a transition between the realms, of the 6 realms of Buddhism. When you start looking to something mystery, it's a seamless transition. It's not like a Disney movie. There's the Wicked Witch, or like a Shakespeare with the 3 witches and Macbeth.
Yeah.
It's to the point where, like, did I see that? Or you start questioning yourself, and that could be in a positive. It doesn't, again, it doesn't have to be, the techniques, or like, rain, mist, cloudy, dusk, dawn, where the Twilight Zone, Rod
Mm-hmm.
Serling's TV show. That's one aspect, but then there's also the wonderment, the opposite. Again, Yūgen, I believe, is a two-sided coin, from what I gather. So you have this wonderment of light, the sky, the birds doing a certain thing. That's a positive wonderment. That's more on the light side, of the force,
Mm-hmm.
compared to the darker side, which would be more of focusing on the animal realm, the ghost realm, and the hell realm.
Okay.
Okay. So then I have the DT Suzuki, which definition, which is a little bit more extensive.
Mm-hmm.
And just to let you know, this I think would definitely apply in a great way towards haiku, because DT Suzuki was best friends with R.H. Blythe. They're buried back to back in Japan in a temple outside of, or inside Kamakura, which I visited, and they were on the same wavelength about a lot of aspects of Zen. So the definition goes by D.T. Suzuki. Yūgen is a compound word. Each part yu and gen, meaning cloudy impenetrability. And on the combination means obscurity, unknowability, mystery, beyond intellectual calculability. Wow, long words here.
Yeah.
But not utter darkness. Okay, that's the key, but not utter darkness. An object so designated is not subject to a dialectical analysis or to a clear-cut definition. There we go. It is not at all presentable to our senses, our sense intellect, as this or that. But this does not mean that the object is altogether beyond the reach of human experience. And then it keeps on going. We feel its present, its secret message being transmitted through the darkness, however impenetrable to the intellect. The feeling is all in all. Cloudiness or obscurity or indefinability is indeed characteristic if we took characteristic of the feeling, but it would be a great mistake if we took the cloudiness for something experientially valueless or devoid of significance to our daily life. And that's the key again, daily life, because that's what haiku poets do. We celebrate and we live in the ordinary, in the daily life. But again, it's our skill to see. And then he concludes, we must remember that reality or the source of all things is to the human understanding an unknown quantity, but that we can feel it in a most concrete way.
I think that's another key thing there. The concrete way. And I had a couple more to add to this, and I'll just say that if somebody wants to read these definitions, I'll put them in the show notes so you can have a read and fully think about them, because they do. I mean, they're not the simplest of ideas.
No, Jane Reichold has one that's still kind of like, if you do a Google, that'll pop up because it's been there for the longest. Her definition, which is very short. And I'm not crazy about it, I'll be honest with you.
Okay.
But I think what it does, though, it gives you an idea like that she uses, and I think this is more of a wonderment example, not, she calls it mystery, but it's like, she says, a woman with a beautiful, I don't know if she said beautiful, but a woman with a fan covering her face and you could only see her eyes is Yūgen. A woman with a mud mask on her face is not Yūgen.
Yeah, I remember that one now. Yes, she does. But as you say, that one's readily available. And I have a couple more before we go on. And I've got, as I said, I'll put them in the show notes, but I've got another one that sort of backs up what Suzuki was saying, which says, Yūgen does not, as sometimes been supposed, have to do with some other world beyond this one. I'm not sure, but rather with the depth of the world we live in, as we experience it through our cultivated imagination. It's an awareness of the universe that triggers emotional responses too deep and mysterious for words. And I think that, to me, that's another important element, that when we're using this tool in our toolbox, it's another way to elicit emotion in our reader as well. And then I had a very short one that I came across. I came across it at the very last minute this morning, by Robert D. Wilson. And it struck home with me because it was it's short and sweet, and it helps me to grasp the concept. And he said, Yūgen is like an echo after the clang of a brass bell. I thought, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I can live with that one. I can work with that. It's quite simple. Anyway, as you said when you were talking about music, we wanted to get to talk about a few examples of poetry, which we hoped would clarify the whole idea, or the general idea that we were talking about. So, forgotten temple, a yellow flower offers itself. Forgotten temple, a yellow flower offers itself. Stanford, why did you want to put this one in?
So I wrote that one in 2004 when I was in Greece visiting H.F. Noyes, and I had gone to the Oracle of Delphi. And when we got off the tour bus, I started walking around. Everyone immediately went up to the main ruins, and I was walking around to the side, and I found this tiny temple, and it could have been a shrine, I don't know, but it was still standing partially. And I had thought about, even this idea, again, a a seamless transition between humans and flowers or the natural world, that though the temple did no longer had humans, it had nature was still part of it, and it was giving its own offering.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very much, I think, I was, in the transcendental way, that it keeps on going. So it was just a beautiful little, and it could apply, it's like when I was in Greece, I basically put on my Japanese mind of the idea of multiple gods, Shinto gods, because they have a god for everything, as the Greeks do.
Yes.
And so I just really enjoyed, and I really got into, mindfully and thinking about the depths of the Greek ancient Greek life and the gods.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very, and again, it's that axle period that the Greeks and the Japanese, like if I said to you, this is slightly off, you can never take your feet out of this, you can never put your feet in the same river twice. You can never put your feet into the same river twice. Sounds very Zen. And it's not. It's Greek. It's Heraclitus. Bada bing, it was at the same time, just in a different
Mm-hmm.
country. So that kind of had my mind of the Shinto, the Japanese ideas too. And then nature takes over, that there is a power of nature, that we are not, again, the interdependence of all beings in
Mm-hmm.
Buddhism, that major foundation pillar of thought.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think when I read it too, I think the way you composed it, if you look at the craft, from my point of view as the
Mhm.
non-poet here, just reading it and trying to look at the Yūgen idea, it's got grace and beauty, which
Yeah.
we're looking for as well, hasn't it? And it's got a slight, if you're looking for the mystery and the eeriness, you've got that in the idea of the forgotten temple, because it's not one of the main big, blingy temples that you would go and see. And then I think the juxtaposition with the yellow flower offering itself, it's
Yes.
just a beautiful, strong juxtaposition too.
And it was filled with light when I
Hmm.
was there. So the buildings were marble, so they were white.
Yes, yes.
And with the yellow flower, and again, it's like the wonderment too. I mean, again, when the baby Buddha, you always see that statue in all the museums. He's pointing with one finger up in the air, and he's pointing with one finger down.
Yes,
So the sky and the earth, and
yes.
you have that the flower receiving the sun.
Hmm. And the idea of the offering, which is also sort of a semi-religious idea of the offering. Yeah, a beautiful piece of work. So this one is temple ruins, pieces of a Buddha still praying. Temple ruins, pieces of a Buddha still praying. Tell us a bit about that one then.
This one, I had originally seen a photograph that was put next to a poem by Octavio Paz, who was a Nobel Prize winning poet. He was Mexican, and he was, I think, at one time, in like a lot of poets, they were ambassadors. They worked in the foreign service. He was ambassador to India, and he was also an ambassador to maybe Japan at one point, or traveled to Japan. But he had written a poem about Buddhas in ruins, and I just thought the idea is, in the end, what Buddha said was, he said that I will not be able to help you. And same Jesus said the same thing. I will not help you. Buddha will not help you. It's our teachings that will help you. So in this sense, that the Buddha, the impermanence of the Buddha, really doesn't matter, but the idea of what he had taught. And that's to me kind of like what the hands are still there, the ruins, but the hands are still there, they're praying. That kind of represents that the spirit is not broken, and everything is, again, impermanent. So the Buddha was just a visual to teach us that. And then the Buddha is actually using itself, if you want to personify that Buddha into a god, or deify that statue, that look, even when I am in pieces, the spirit is still whole.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think something else I got from the readings we've been doing is that Yūgen will express some form of beauty. It will take the ordinary and elevate it, like the yellow
Mm-hmm.
flower in the previous one, and in this case the broken Buddha.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And it doesn't have to be something beautiful. So your yellow flower could have been a weed. Didn't
Yes,
It would have been
it most
fine,
likely it
and
was. Yeah,
probably was. Yeah. This Buddha is broken and lying in pieces, so it's not the beautiful piece of work it once was. Of it, it's a ruin of what it was, and yet the poem has elevated it into something extraordinary as
yeah.
well.
Yeah, when I was in graduate school studying Spanish literature, we had talked about ruins,
Hmm.
and ruins evoke the past. So
Yeah.
when you have a poem with ruins in it, you're actually, even though it's a haiku moment, it's in the now, your mind wants to, and it should like hit another level. Like in the United States, we had the poets around, I mean the painters around the same time as the transcendentalists, the Hudson Valley or Hudson River painters, and they would do two paintings. They would go to Europe and paint a castle in ruins.
Hmm.
Would be one painting with the landscape and everything, and then they would do a second painting with the same exact landscape, and then with the building in as if it were new, like back in the ancient times. So you're comparing the two
Uh-huh.
at the same time, and that's what kind of, when we see ruins, our mind goes to what was in the past. It gives us an idea, makes us remember our humanity and that time, that the idea of time
Hmm.
and impermanence by
Yes.
looking at that. But it's also, there's also the beauty, the rustic beauty too.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely. This could have been about Angkor Wat, and it's beautiful. And even though it's absolutely swamped with tourists, it still has the element of
yeah.
spirituality hasn't been lost. That was beautiful. And then I've got another one I'm going to share, but it's not one of yours this time. So let me just bring
Okay.
it up. Now this one is from Jackie Pierce. She won the third prize Martin Lucas Haiku Award in 2020, and it's from Presence at issues 69. And it's a different take, shall we say. So let's hear it. Hide and seek. I disappear into the sound of rain. Hide and seek. I disappear into the sound of rain.
The Yūgen in there again is, to me, this is like, it's like multiple Yūgen in the sense that um, it keeps it keeps transitioning, it keeps seamlessly going up and back
Hmm.
again. Like in some poems, it's just like the rain that acts as, you're moving away the curtain or going through it. I mean, there's a passage, right, from one realm into the next, and that's why,
Yes.
like the Jizo we were talking about before, who was the bodhisattva for traveling and is put on the road, but always the seamless transition, and our and the mist, the rain. Yeah, that's a wonderful poem.
Yes. You've hit it. I mean, that's what it was for me. The mist of the rain took me straight into that sort of Yūgen sphere. Jackie has not chosen, um, a wonderful, beautiful vision. It's the rain. Rain is quite miserable sometimes, and yet she's elevated it.
And she also, hide and seek, I disappear into the sound of the rain. And it could very well be the way she disappears is because now she's wet,
Yeah, true.
you
This is
know.
true.
So there's a physical transition too. And I think that's really important, that we lose that so much. Like that's why I think Santoka is such a wonderful poet,
Hmm.
because his stuff is, if you're reading about his travels, you have to, like when we read about rain now, we're 9 out of 10 times we're probably sitting out inside watching the rain from the window,
Yeah.
compared to the poet who is actually physically getting wet, might not have a change of clothes, might be walking, so they're going to get soggy and itchy, and they could get cold or sick. That's what we need to feel when we read. I mean, that's part of it. But when she gets wet, because it's hide and seek into the sound of rain, now the rain is more.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
she's coming inside out now instead of outside in.
And I've got one last one, and it's back to you again. So our last example today is from Stanford again, and it's morning light, all the stone Buddhas robed in gold. Morning light, all the stone Buddhas robed in gold.
I wrote this one in Tokyo, at Zojoji Temple, which I didn't realize was a major Pure Land temple. And it's not that far. If you know Japan, Tokyo, it's not that far walking distance from Tokyo Tower, which is looks like the Eiffel Tower. And that one was filled, that complex, with Jizos, but it was also filled with the stone Buddhas. And again, the Yūgen to me is this wonderment
Mm-hmm.
of almost like, I forget, I don't know if it was a European tradition, is like when they would show paintings, they'd have a painting of a scene, and then the artist would have a little finger pulling the scene back, and you could see behind the scene.
Mm.
I,
Don't
I,
know that one. No.
I think it was like 18th century or early 19th century paintings. It was a maybe it was American tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Not that you haven't been here, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So, but so that is very interesting, and I think with the idea of being clothed or unclothed, it's like, you know, we always see the stone Buddhas, but now the sun is rising. It's it's a wonderment poem, but it's like to see all of a sudden now we're seeing past the veil. They're robed in gold. They have that beautiful yellow instead of just rags.
Mm.
But the beauty of it, and the supernatural maybe, or wonderment again, is that it's of light. So it's not permanent, like the Buddha is not permanent. They take it off at the end of the day, they put it back on in the morning. That's another version of that poem, I guess,
I guess so. And again, much like some of the others, there is that godlike. I mean, I don't know enough about Zen to say it's Zen-like, so I go with my Christian point of view, should we say?
Sure.
And there is a very godlike, religious atmosphere about it. And in the play of the morning light and the gold, I don't think you need to see it. I've seen it again in temples in Thailand, but there is a great, again, state of beauty and godlike presence when you see these things, regardless of the number of tourists that are around snapping it. It's
Sure.
just beautiful. And so I really enjoyed that poem. Thank you, Stanford. So now we've given the examples, we've had a bash at defining it. Do you have any tips for somebody who would be writing using this part of their toolkit?
I would say to, again, get a feeling first,
Mm-hmm.
read the classical ones,
Mm-hmm.
to give yourself a background and understand that, again, they're coming from a Buddhist, they're coming from a different set of aesthetic values, aesthetic and aesthetic values. And we probably have, or we do have, maybe it's not as defined in the West, our own, again, our own Yūgen. And I mean, I think it's okay to be, and I'm a big proponent of writing about Asian things if you've experienced them,
Mm-hmm.
but not necessarily, if you haven't experienced them, there's still enough here. And writing again, it's your day. It's the haiku is daily. It's our part of our daily life. So it's, find the huge, I mean, it could be about, like, in the United States, where the American Indians once were.
Mm-hmm.
It could be finding an arrowhead, or, even like, how the Japanese have cicadas. That's very Yūgen like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where the shell is left, but the cicada is
True.
gone.
Yeah.
We have our 17-year cicadas here, which actually this year is coming to the East Coast.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
I'm actually looking forward to that. I remember as a child in New York City, in Staten Island, the whole street covered completely, like you could not see the street. It was crazy.
Wow.
But so, we have our own set of Yūgens from our own, like, of course, there's a lot of poets from India. They have definitely their own more Yūgen than probably anybody,
Mm-hmm.
It's, explore your own. And it could be, again, very subtly used. It depends on what degree and what type of, it could be more on the hyperbole side
Mm-hmm.
of things, or it could be very, very subtle. Yeah.
It's been a pleasure talking to you today, and
Absolutely
thank you
pleasure
for
too.
thanks for helping me get a bit of a grasp on it. And I would say to people, don't worry too much. We're just beginning. We're looking at this in general terms, and we're going to grow in this together. So thank you so much for helping us grow, Stanford.
Okay, thank you.
So I've had a little while to think about what Stanford and I were discussing. It's really a hard topic, and we only scratched the surface. But I thought I'd give you my takeaways from today to give you a bit of an idea what the editing team will be looking for when it comes to writing for the topic. So write about what you know. Stanford said, if you've been to Asia, if you live in Asia and you visit temples, you know about them, write about them. But it's probably not a good direction to go in if you've never experienced the temple environment. As he said, haiku is about your day-to-day activities, what you know from day to day. Write about something ordinary, like Stanford's little yellow flower, but highlight the extraordinary about it. Definitely write something that's moved you, because it will surely connect with your reader. And show your reader, don't tell them. Aim for something deep and mysterious, or something which expresses wonderment, and perhaps even both. But how do you go about putting that feeling of Yūgen into your poetry? Stanford gave you some ideas, but I wanted just to highlight a few maybe. He said, write about something of the past. Maybe you can go way back in history, a period you know a lot about, or maybe you can just go back into your childhood or last week, something that's got a bit of mystery or history about it. You could write a subtle interchanging of realms, and we've seen that in the poetry we've heard today. Definitely think about your words. Choose words which elicit a sense of darkness or mystery, grace or beauty. And again, Stanford gave you some tips for that. And I'll just reiterate again, express the beauty of the ordinary. And although we might be writing about things of the past, haiku, our poetry, always takes place in the present. Thanks so much to Stanford for coming along and talking to me about Yūgen. Like I said, a tricky subject, but I hope you've enjoyed it, and I look forward to reading your submissions in the future. Until next time, keep writing.